Welcome to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast. I am your host, Kayleigh Greenacre, a business strategist, coach, TEDx speaker, author, and your go-to woman for all things business strategy. I am obsessed with supporting female entrepreneurs to grow unstoppable six and multi-six-figure businesses that they love, giving them the freedom and life that they desire. During this podcast, I'll be sharing with you everything that you need to become a successful female entrepreneur, from the mindset shifts to sales and marketing strategies, and how to become an iconic leader that people can't get enough of. It is my mission to help you stand out, attract your dream clients and customers, and sell out of your offers with ease whilst building the business and life of your dreams. Let's make this your reality, ladies. Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Actually I Can, the Female Entrepreneur podcast. And I'm joined today by the fabulous Nicola Jayne Green, who is a business and mindset coach for busy mums. And in this episode, we are going to be diving into how you can follow your dreams as a mumpreneur. Nicola, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining today's podcast episode.
Thank you for having me. Very excited.
I'm really excited as well to be diving into this topic of following your dreams, because I think as a mumpreneur, we are pulled in lots of different directions. So I'm really, really excited to be diving into this. But before we dive into the topic itself, could you give us or our listeners a little bit of a background to your own journey and story?
Yes, sure. So for the last 17 years, I've actually been a HR officer in the Royal Air Force, but I kind of got into that career, if I'm honest, because I felt very lost in life. I'd come out of uni in Manchester. I found work, but it was very unfulfilling. So I moved to London, did a few jobs there. That also left me feeling very unfulfilled. And I actually ended up working in the London Palladium for about a year, which was really great fun. But it just got to the point where I thought, you know, what is going on here? That grand plan of going out into the world and becoming really successful doing something I love, like so many of us have. It just felt like it was getting further and further away. And looking ahead, I knew that if I stayed where I was, the future wasn't going to be one that I wanted. So I decided to pack up again, move back home. I decided I'd apply to join the military, as you do, which was the biggest shock to everybody, including myself, to be honest. And although it's offered me like many amazing opportunities over the years, even from day one, I knew that deep down, it was never really my true calling. And that feeling never really went away for me. And I found the longer I was in, the more I was almost desperately trying to figure out what was my true calling. I know now with hindsight, it was always coaching, because I remember even from being really quite young, I'd often have people that I didn't really know that well open up to me about all sorts of life issues. And even though I always wondered, you know, why me? Why have they opened up to me? It did always feel like a real honor, and I absolutely loved that feeling. But back then, coaching wasn't really a thing in the UK, which sounds really crazy now that I say that. And I suppose I just thought that it wasn't really an option. So fast forward 10 years into my career in the Air Force, I ended up attending a conference hosted by the author of The Chimp Paradox. I'm sure you've probably read that book. It's a really great book. And that's when the light bulbs finally went off for me. And I just knew that the personal development world was the world that I really wanted to be in. So pretty much straight away, I went and got my ILM and NLP coaching accreditations. And I don't think that I'd ever felt so excited and revved up to start anything. But then I found out I needed to start IVF. So what ended up being 3 rounds of that to get our 2 little girls now. Setting up my side hustle just went on hold until my youngest was 18 months old. And at that point, I just couldn't wait any longer. So I refreshed my quals, I got ICF accredited and started my NLP Master Practitioner training. And 2 years on, I'm here helping ambitious working mums who've returned to work after kids, who feel like they're lost or they're stuck or they're sick of dealing with a juggle that no longer works, build up their confidence and mindset so they can like confidently start their own transition into the online space doing something they love. So I help them with both elements, and I'm doing this alongside my Air Force career still at the moment. So the transition is well underway for me, and I absolutely love it. And that's me.
How exciting as well. And what a journey, what a story and what a journey that you've been on previously, but also you're really leaning into that transition and going forwards and moving forwards with obviously your business as well to go all in, take it full time, which will be super
Yeah,
exciting for you.
yeah.
So there are lots of listeners to this podcast who are mums and who are juggling being a mum, being an entrepreneur, maybe even juggling another business or career as well. Why do you think then that so many mums put their dreams on hold before or after having kids? I think this is something that is quite common and there are quite a few common barriers around it. So why do you think they do that?
I think a lot of reasons. I think fear, imposter syndrome, perceived lack of time, lack of self-belief, thinking they might not have what it takes. I think comparison's a biggie, looking at others and thinking they could never do that themselves. And after kids, I think you can throw guilt into the mix too, which I'm sure we'll touch on a bit more later. But I think the main reason so many mums put their dreams on hold is that deep belief that they're not good enough because for whatever reason, motherhood's kind of knocked their confidence that they used to have. And after kids, it's also the worry about finance and time too, which is why I'm a real strong advocate for career transition rather
Yes.
than straight jump, unless of course you've got the resource or the savings to do that, then brilliant. But I think for most of us, from a financial perspective, a transition can work really well. And it definitely eases the pressure. And I think also sometimes before kids, you can sometimes adopt this perception a little bit that you've got all the time in the world and there's no particular rush. Because,
Mm.
maybe there isn't before kids and you kind of think, yeah, I'll look into that next month or next year when I'm not busy doing X, Y, Z, but not really realizing how much time you do actually have before kids. Or for some mums, and I know this was true for myself, even though I was in a career I knew wasn't my true calling, sometimes I feel like many of us feel like we've got to push on and prove ourselves in what we're doing first in order to believe that we're worthy or capable of having that success doing something else. And we'll try and make it work for as long as we can, even then when we know it no longer fits in with what makes us happy. And I'm
Mm.
not sure if at the time I was like consciously aware of it, but definitely now I've spent almost a decade in the mindset space. You do end up doing a lot of reflecting, don't you? And looking back on it all now, I think I'd say that was definitely what was stopping me, just feeling like I didn't have what it took, even before kids. And that's probably because for the first decade of my career in the Air Force, despite working my way through the ranks and doing very well, I often just felt like a massive imposter. And I think when you're used to living in that space and you haven't addressed that issue, because you're constantly trying to prove your worth to yourself and to others, it's hard to then imagine being able to go and step into something completely different and being successful in that. So I think often we just choose to stay in our comfort zones, even if we know it isn't in alignment with us, because it feels safe. And wherever possible, it's like human nature, isn't it, to try and avoid fear and anything that makes us feel scared.
Oh, absolutely. I can completely resonate with that as well with myself and
You are
following my
nodding.
own journey. But being, I obviously come from the public sector and working in schools and education, but it was where I was comfortable, but it was never
Yeah,
a dream. It was never, I never actually intended or wanted to be a teacher. Never.
yeah,
But when I got into it, I felt comfortable. I knew I was good at what I did. And
yeah,
so I think, and I worked my way up very, very quickly. And I stayed there. I stayed as an assistant head for a long, long time, and especially whilst also being a mum. And I think it was, that kind of security
yeah,
financially, but also security in terms of I know what I'm doing. I know how to walk into a classroom and teach 30 kids at a time and walk into assemblies and this, that, and the other. And I think that's just my own perspective of it and obviously my own experiences. But that comfort, I think we
yeah,
do, don't we, as human beings, we always go to the comfort, to the things that
yeah.
feel safe and secure rather than taking a risk or looking at potentially something that we have a fear about or a fear behind.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think the fact so many of us work so hard to get to the positions where we're in before kids, like you say, I think that you can feel like if you venture away from what you've come to know, even if you know on that deeper level or inner level that it's not quite right for you anymore, it can feel like you're about to chuck in all the effort that you've put in over the years and lose everything that you've built up. And that's
Mm.
really scary, isn't it? Especially if you've waited until having kids, because it's not just yourself that you're thinking about anymore, it's them. So
Mm.
I think if we're really honest about this, I think all of what we've just talked about does boil down to fear, though, because starting something else is really scary. And whether or not we've had kids, you know, if our mindset isn't in a good place or a strong place, the thought of venturing out doing something we perhaps know that we'll love, but we're total beginners in, can feel really exciting, but it can feel really scary too. And that's where all those doubts start creeping in and the fears start creeping in. So then we just come up with all the reasons why we shouldn't or we can't. But, you know, they're just excuses, aren't they?
Exactly that. I think everyone has a dream. Everyone has dreams and goals and things that they would love to be able to, to achieve. I've had a couple of episodes just in the last couple of days of people who are not entrepreneurs, and they've actually reached out and said, "Oh, I'd love to have my own business. I'd love to do what you do." I'm like, "Well, you
Yeah,
can. There's
yeah, you
nothing
can. You
stopping
can. It's
you.
possible. Even with
Do
kids,
it."
it's possible.
Absolutely. And I think, and again, it all comes down to fear. Absolutely. I think, or there's a lot of elements there of where fear does creep in, and then procrastination potentially might kick in and all of the things. But
Mm.
let's think about, people's goals and ambitions, especially females who are mums and potentially either entrepreneurs or looking to go down that route. But how does becoming a mum change a woman's perspective on her own goals and ambitions, would you say?
I think for a lot of mums, their ambitions and desires grow even stronger after kids. They definitely did for me anyway. I'm taken by your nod that it did for you.
Yes.
For a few reasons, I think. One of the biggest ones being that I just really wanted to become a role model for the girls, to show them what was possible and to show them that they really can create and do work that they actually love and enjoy. And they don't have to do a traditional 9 to 5 role if that's not what they want. And if mummy can do it, there's some real evidence and proof for them of what's possible. And knowing that you've got the tools as well to help them make it happen if that's what they want, that's such an amazing gift. And also, I think it's just realizing the difference I'd be able to make to their lives and, my own life by creating a successful business. Because for one, in the online space, there's really no cap on what you're able to earn. And working for yourself, particularly if you end up producing evergreen products and services, you're just going to have so much more time freedom. Now, obviously, I'm still in the transition space with my 9 to 5 role. And for me, that's purely because I'm very close to a pension point that I've worked nearly 20 years to get to. But
Yeah.
I can absolutely see the path now that's before me, and how when the time comes and my coaching business becomes my full-time source of income, that freedom and flexibility is just going to be a total game changer. I'll never have to worry about missing a sports day or a parents' evening or being sent away with work. And that's just so invaluable, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that was a massive game changer for me, is just really having that flexibility and the freedom more than anything else, more than the wealth, more than the money, more than the sales, more than anything. It was having that opportunity not only to support your clients, obviously, in achieving what they want to achieve or their transitions, but having the opportunity to, as a mum, spend more time with your children. And I remember, being able to take Sophia, my daughter, to school. I walked her to school for the first time. I didn't know any of the mums. I didn't know anyone at the school gate. It was alien to me. I was like, whoa, I'm normally the first parent literally to drop her off at before school club and pick her up before the last parent. And this is so alien to me, but it was something that I'd dreamt of for a long, long time. And it felt so wholesome. It felt so, like I had achieved one of my
Yeah.
most important goals.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful, isn't it? And I think it's really incredible to have that flexibility, freedom. And I think you're right. I think as mums, when you do become a mum, your goals and ambitions can become even more powerful. And it's
Yeah.
dependent on your perspective and how you look at things, and what your goal is, I suppose. But absolutely, being a mum, I think it encourages you, should I say, even more to really lean into what you want to go for.
Yeah.
What would you say in terms of, because looking at this from the perspective of being a mum, but I also think that quite a lot of mums have this idea or mindset that potentially it's too late to pursue their dreams or goals after they've had children. What's your perspective on this?
Well, I think a biggest tip for me would be, if your current circle of mum friends or colleagues or acquaintances or even family members are people who you think would kind of poo-poo your idea or not really get it,
Yeah.
or inadvertently put you off, or sow, well-meaning seeds of doubt into your head, just to avoid the conversation with them about it for now, until you're confident about what it is that you want to do and where you're heading, and focus on finding evidence of other mums who have gone and had success after kids. And they won't have to look far. I mean, if they're listening to this, they're already tuning into podcasts that are doing just that, aren't they? And they do say you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. And in my opinion, that applies to people that you're hanging out with in the online space too. And if none of your current close circle of friends, acquaintances, family are people that are striving to achieve more themselves, or if they don't particularly have any further goals or ambitions, it's really not going to kind of help you build the confidence or the self-belief you need to make a start. So look for online Facebook groups or memberships to be part of, or online or in-person networking events. The in-person events obviously a bit easier if you've got older kids, but find some good podcasts and just kind of like immerse yourself with evidence of other mums that have made it work, and just also start to question that statement as well, like it's too late. Like, why is it too late? Like, try flipping it and asking yourself to give you all the reasons why it isn't too late, because your brain is going to focus on what you direct it to focus on, and you might be quite pleasantly surprised with what it comes up with when you flip that question on its head.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I don't think it's ever too late. It doesn't matter what age you are, what stage you are in your life, whether you're a mum, whether you're not a mum, it doesn't matter. I think when we start to put time constraints on ourselves in terms of what we're able to achieve, we're just completely blocking the possibilities and opportunities for ourselves as individuals. And I really do believe that it's never too late to do anything. If you have a goal, if you have a dream, if you have an ambition, no matter what the situation, as long as you're fit and healthy and you can get the support that you want or need, you can go after that goal or dream. And I'm fully a believer of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, wholeheartedly.
So what about guilt? Because we touched on this at the very beginning, but I'm really excited to dive into this because I feel like the topic of guilt is something that we as mums are accustomed to, and we potentially can struggle with. So what role does guilt actually play in stopping mums from going after their dreams, and how can they navigate this feeling of guilt around being a mum, but also running a business?
Yeah. I think guilt crops up for so many mums because we can feel like we should just be happy with our current situation. And for us to indicate in any way that we want more is to say that we're not happy or content with what we have. But it's not that we're not happy with what we have at all. Having, gone through 3 rounds of IVF to get my girls, they're the most special thing in the world to me, and they make me very happy, of course. But I think when you know deep down that you've got more to give and more that you want to do in life, I think the view is that it can be selfish to do that, because I think society would sometimes have us believe that our every waking moment should be focused on the kids. And when we don't, that brings on the guilt. But I think you've just got to ask yourself, are they going to be seeing and experiencing the best version of mum if she's feeling uninspired or flat or unfulfilled in her work, or like, all her ambitions at the age she is now have been put on the shelf already, when she's probably got decades of her life left to live. It's not the kids or anything else that's causing those feelings of wanting more. It's her work and her feeling like she's not living out her purpose or her potential. I've only got to think about my own mum and how she gave up her dream of becoming a nurse to be at home with us when we were all young. And I love her so much for that. And that was her decision, based on what she thought was best at the time. But I've always felt a deep sadness for her too, because I know how much she wanted that. And I'd have loved her, just to have gone out and fulfilled her dream. And I know she watched another mum friend of hers go ahead and do it at the same time as she stopped her training and become successful. And that must have been really hard for her. And obviously the guilt that she felt was the thing that stopped her. But, I think you got to remember, one of the biggest drivers for mums like ourselves wanting to make it work in the online space these days, which wasn't even an option available to our parents back then, is ultimately to give our kids the best life that we possibly can, and at the same time live the most fulfilled life for ourselves. And why shouldn't every woman want that for themselves too? Having kids doesn't make you irrelevant, does it? Or mean that all your ambitions need to be shelved, and it doesn't mean that you no longer have things that you want to say or do or achieve. You don't turn into another person when you become a mum. You're still you with the same dreams and ambitions and goals. But going back to that self-care that I mentioned earlier, if you're not doing this, I think you will definitely be more prone to mum guilt, because you won't be operating as the best version of yourself. And this isn't things like just having a bubble bath with candles once a week, as nice as that is.
Yeah.
Real self-care. I mean, real self-care when you're, how are you talking to yourself on a daily basis? What food are you putting inside your body? How much water are you taking in? What exercise or movement are you doing? As well as allowing yourself, sometimes guilty pleasures as well that you think you really shouldn't be doing. So it could be a bit of escapism on TV, or doing something that really feeds your soul, walking out in nature, or just taking the time to pick up the phone and have a really good chat with an old friend that you've not spoken to for ages.
I love it. Self-care is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. And I know it can feel really hard when you feel so busy, but when your head's in a good space, you're really going to find the guilt start to slip away. So I'd just say, pick one thing that you can go all in on consistently for 3 months, something that is just for you. And by that time, if you've done it consistently, that thing will have turned into a habit, and then move on to something else and slowly build up your self-care routine. Don't feel like you've got to do it all at once, because that's just going to be really overwhelming.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? I know I've had previous conversations with mumpreneurs as well on this topic, where a lot of the time, there's a little bit of comparison. There's a little bit of looking at other people in the online space that are seeming to be doing everything. But ultimately, some of those people are not mums. And I think as a mum, we have to recognize the fact that one of our job roles is to be a mum, and that's something that we absolutely value and absolutely will be our priority. But at the same time, we need to kind of factor that in to our time, to our energy, to our self-care, which again all has this knock-on effect to our children. And I think that's the real thing, isn't it? And again, the comparison kind of concept around it is just making sure that we're prioritizing our own health, our own self-care, so that we can, like you said, show up and be the best version of ourselves for our families, and also for ourselves, to be honest with you. But so we can so we can move forwards and positively create impact both in our business, but also in our personal lives.
Yeah. And you don't have to view it as like, oh, I'm putting myself first, because that concept, it doesn't sit well with some mums, but it's just putting yourself as an equal. It's putting yourself on the same level as everybody else that you're doing everything for the whole time. Like, bring yourself up to that level too. Don't always put yourself last.
Absolutely. And we've touched a little bit on kind of time and how to manage, but let's dive into the demands of parenting and actively pursuing your dreams as an entrepreneur. Do you have any advice around this and how they can balance being a parent and also being an entrepreneur?
Well, I'm never going to pretend that it's easy. And I think nothing that's worthwhile is ever easy, by the way. But it doesn't have to feel like it's so hard if you do it in the right way. And the right way, in my opinion, is doing the groundwork first. So getting your confidence and your mindset in a real good place, because success in the online space really is 80% mindset related, isn't it? And I'll admit it did take me a while for that penny to drop. I just wanted to charge straight in with the business and the technical aspects before it actually needed to. Wasted a lot of time with that, and started to neglect the mindset stuff for a while right at the beginning. And it's really crazy what a difference that can make. So I think my first tip, along with getting really good self-care routine in place and making sure you're filling your own cup, which is also part of the mindset piece, would be the first thing. Second thing I'd probably say, if you're wanting to start up your own online business and you're still working, is to set yourself a time frame that feels really good for you. I totally get it when you've had enough in your role and it no longer works for you as a family and you want to get out as quickly as possible. But we've got to remember that we do have other commitments, like you say, so think about what time frame is going to allow you to still be the present mum as much as you can be and want to be, whilst at the same time working on growing something that you can really enjoy the process of, because this is meant to be fun at the end of the day. And yeah, there's going to be points, isn't there, in the building phase where there'll be times where you will have to make a sacrifice of time with the kids for your business. But here's where I think you've got to think bigger picture and decide whether the life and the work that you're dreaming about is worth the sacrifice of these small pockets of time short term for the longer term time freedom and flexibility that you're going to end up creating. So yeah, I think that's what I would say for that. And let's be real, if you want to set up a business whilst with kids at home, no matter what their age is, there's going to be times where you're going to be feeling that little bit more tired than some of your other mum friends or colleagues, because you've spent the night creating your website or coming up with training or figuring out what a funnel is. Like, what the hell's a funnel when you first get started? Getting through on your social media messaging, rather than putting your feet up in front of the TV. But if you've got your time management in order and you develop good routines and habits, and there's some of the things I help my clients with, you're going to be doing all of this in a way that works for you. And everyone's different in that respect. A mum that's got kids who are older, who don't want or need mum to put them to bed anymore, or, they might lay in on the weekend. They're obviously going to have a bit more room to get on with these things than someone like myself, who's got toddlers who, definitely do want me to put them to bed at night and who definitely don't like a lay-in, unfortunately. So it's all about, working out what's going to work best for you, knowing your limitations, setting some really strong boundaries as well, and having the support you need to make it work.
I love this. I love the fact that you're, all the advice that you've given there in terms of, time management, but routines and habits, and really working out or figuring out as a mumpreneur what works for you and your family. And I think that's such great advice, because again, everyone is different, and what Sally up the road is doing is going to be different to potentially what's going to work for you. So I think that's
exactly
great advice. And also looking at, your productivity as well. I know I had another guest on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we were looking at kind of sleep deprivation and looking at it from a different perspective in terms of, again, time and energy. But again, finding those pockets of time where you can be most productive, and switching off devices, Netflix, whatever it is, whatever you can do in that time where you can focus on your business and your work, and you don't have your role as a mum to play, potentially when the kids are at school, and your most productive time of the day. Spend an hour or 2 hours just and completely block that out to focus on whatever you need to focus on at that particular time for your business. But great advice there, absolutely. And what about judgment? Because I think this is another thing as well that I've experienced, and I know that other people have as well. There is a fear of judgment, and there will always be people that have their own opinion and judge you on what you do. Do you have any advice for mums who might fear judgment or even lack of support from others when they decide to pursue their dreams and their business?
I'd probably just say, what do you fear more? What people might think or how people might react, versus not following your heart and looking back when you're 90 in your rocking chair, thinking about what could have been if you'd only taken a chance on yourself, or if you hadn't worried so much about what others might be thinking. And, let's be real, most of the time, people are thinking about themselves. They're not spending their days thinking about you or I. People are much more concerned with their own lives. And if someone does have a judgment, just let them have it, because they're entitled to their own opinion at the end of the day. But don't let that stop you. You've got to make sure that you're the author of your own story at the end of the day. And if you really fear that you won't have the support that you want or that you need at home, I think there could be a bigger question to think about there. And that would be questioning why, and are you okay with that? Because you and only you have the final say in what you choose to do with your life, because it's yours. And I'm so passionate about helping other women find this for themselves, and just to feel empowered and freed from feeling stuck. It's just such an amazing space to work in, knowing that you can help really make a difference to people's lives. But it has to start with that person deciding that they're going to do it for themselves, despite the fear of judgment or lack of support. And support is always available, even if it's not at home. You can always find the support you need within the online space, which is the world that you're wanting to get into. So on the support front, don't worry about that. That will always be around in bucket loads.
Oh, absolutely. There are some incredible other mumpreneurs and fabulous females and males out there in the online space that absolutely will be able to support and offer support. And you know, so many people can create their own networks, communities, accountability partners and groups, can't they? There's absolutely no shortage of support out there. But I love that advice, because I do think it is something that a lot of mums do worry about. And again, I can take myself back to that time and remember it very well, that I was worried. I was always worried about what other people would think. And I now look back and I'm thinking to myself, why did I worry?
Yeah, I
Those that
know.
support you will support you, and those that don't, it's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but it doesn't matter. You know, like you said, I think everyone has their own opinion and perspective on things, and they are entitled to that. But at the end of the day, this is about you and your dream and you following that passion. So I definitely always think that as long as it aligns and fits in well with you and your immediate family, so your children, your partner, etc., I think that is the main thing, isn't it? And really focusing on what you want to fulfill in your dream.
And I think oftentimes as well, when people do judge or they try to put you off, it's because they actually want what you want, but they don't have the courage to go for it. So when they see somebody else going for it, it's making them feel rubbish. You know, so to try and put somebody off, even they might not even be doing that consciously, but it's making them feel like, oh, I really wanted to do something like that too, and I can't. So I don't want you to do it because that's going to make me feel really bad. And that's all can sometimes be on a completely subconscious level as well, but bear that in mind as well. They'll probably come to you in 5 years saying like, can you show me what to do, please?
That's it. Absolutely. Is there any final advice that you would give our listeners today, especially those that are mumpreneurs or looking into going down the route of pursuing and continuing to grow their businesses?
I think if you've got a dream or an ambition or a desire and it's been bubbling away in you for a while, to just go for it, because what's the worst that can happen, particularly if you're going to do it in a transition style, you know, so there is no risk involved. It's just that kind of, you know, you'll have to spend a little bit more time than usual on growing it. But if you want something enough, you owe it to yourself to take the first steps and just go for it, get the support that you need, and just see what happens. And don't put so much pressure on it. You know, go into it deciding that you're going to enjoy every single moment of this and just immerse yourself in it and love it. And then you won't have that fear then of looking back, you know, when you are 90, thinking, you know, what if? I think that's just the worst thing you could do for yourself, is having that what if hanging over you. Nobody wants that. So I just say, just go for it.
Go for it. Follow the dream. And never look back, you know, unless it's upon reflection. You know, at the end of the day, this is your opportunity. I love this. Such incredible advice, Nicola. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast today. I've got one final question for you before,
Okay.
before we wrap up. I ask every single guest this question. What is your word of the year and why?
Mine would be growth, I think, because from both a business and personal perspective, this year growth has been exactly what it's been about in so many different ways. And I feel so grateful for the support I've had to be able to be on this journey in the first place, and how much I've learned and still continue to learn. And that's down to family, my amazing coach, Brooke Summer Adams, I know you know her, the support networks I'm part of, and opportunities like this as well. So the word growth really for me is the biggie.
Amazing. Great word as well. I don't think we've had growth on our podcast yet. So amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Where can our listeners find you and connect with you, Nicola?
I'm on Instagram as The Meant for More Mum, and I'm on Facebook as Nicola Jayne Green. So go ahead and find me on there.
Make sure you go and connect with Nicola. She's absolutely incredible at what she does, and such an inspiration as well for so many females, especially mumpreneurs, really leaning into or diving into their business even further. But Nicola, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great.
And thank you so much to everyone that's tuned into today's episode. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And I'll see you all again next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast with me, your host, Kayleigh Greenacre. If you are ready to build, grow and scale your dream 6-figure or multi-6-figure business, then head to our website now for more information or connect with me on socials to see how you can create your dream business and dream life.